Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Σωτήρης Πετρόπουλος. I'm co-founder of HIGGS and assistant professor at the University of the Peloponnese. I'm very happy to welcome you in today's panel that it is titled Towards a More Impactful World. I have with me two very important guests and speakers. Ludwig Forrest, who is head of philanthropy of the King Baudouin Foundation in Brussels, Belgium, and Transnational Giving Europe coordinator, and Guy Beigel, who is vice president of social finance in Israel. Thank you very much for being with us. So this panel is all around and about impact, and by impact I mean social, positive impact, that it can also have environmental dimensions. In today's world, if we had this panel 2 decades ago, maybe it wouldn't be of any real interest, but nowadays we are seeing more and more people, especially in the ecosystem of what I call civil society, to be talking about how impactful we can be through the different activities that we are supporting or that we are actually implementing. Now, we have good indications that it becomes more and more interesting to have this discussion. But in a way, it has not very well framed, especially in Greece. Though we see a lot of companies, charitable foundations, non-profit organizations, social enterprises talking about impact. For example, we see a lot of charitable foundations putting emphasis on their proposals in the forms that the non-profits are actually submitting of, talk to me a bit about the impact that this project, the X project, will have. And then we have companies, especially through their CSR departments, that they are more willing to go deeper than just the number of people reached, and even go and perform a social impact assessment. This is a buzzword that I see and hear more frequently than ever. Or even a social return on investment, which is an add-on usually to the social impact assessment activity. And then we have the non-profits that pushed by these two other stakeholders, but also because they want to see what the real impact is of their activities. We see them also trying to go deeper than just counting the mere outputs of a project they're implementing. So in general, I think that there is a growing discussion there, and I'm very happy that I will be discussing with you based on your wide experience on what is impact and how we can move forward from what we are today, where we are today. So let me start with the questions. Ludwig, the first one, it's for both of you, but Ludwig, you can start. And of course, feel free to have it as an open discussion altogether. So the first one is, how do you understand impact? And what is your institution doing about it, how it is handling it?
Thank you, Sotiri's, and thank you for having me at this great conference. It's a pleasure. Impact is, since years, quite a hot topic at the King Baudouin Foundation, but also in the foundation world in Europe. But before impact, you must have philanthropy. And philanthropy, this complementary role it plays towards public action, there are many ways to do philanthropy, and I will cover some, and Guy, you will cover other ones, and this is also depends on which way you do philanthropy. The impact is important and can change. We also agree that sometimes you should not measure impact. I will give you a clear example. When the COVID crisis started in March 2020, King Baudouin Foundation, we gave 2 million away to organizations just to help, just to be generous, with trust in the people that we helped, because if there was an emergency, there was an urgency. But of course, sometimes measuring the impact and reflecting to the potential impact of one action is important. So you said it, it can start with KPIs at least, but you can have a real impact strategy. That's before the project. After the project, you can measure to obtain the results. But this is a choice. Why? Because sometimes it has a cost, so you must choose. We are giving that money away. What are we ready to invest into measuring the impact? So the why do I measure impact must be very clear. The second thing that we insist on when we are talking to donors that are asking, and what is the King Baudouin Foundation doing for impact, or what will you do for us to measure impact? We always say, be humble, be very humble. You are not doing philanthropy to obtain medals. And it's not an easy thing to measure impact when, for example, you are helping children in poverty, because the impact will be there in 20 years from now. That's one of the reasons. The second reason is that often you are not helping the organization alone. So with your support next to other support, which is your impact? It's a collaborative impact. So impact is not always easy. I will deepen in a few seconds on what the KBF is doing, but we are sure that there is no single methodology to solve societal problems. And that will be interesting also to hear you, Guy, to have all this innovation, as you said, the impact financing, because next to more traditional philanthropy, venture philanthropy, it will be a combination of methodology that really will create impact. So don't be ashamed to be generous. Don't think that only investing is the right methodology. No, it is always a combination of methodology that create impact. So at KBF, and I will finish on this, we are measuring impact on 4 dimensions when we build a project. The first one is, did we really empower the organization or the project that we did support? Second, did we raise awareness on the societal problem in a more general public, or into a public that is of interest for the topic? Did we change the attitude? Third dimension. And fourth, did we initiate governmental action? So those 4 dimensions will guide the impact measures and guide the construction of a project at the King Baudouin Foundation. After that, we do the evaluation at 3 levels. At the project level, the organization level, did it work, and so on and so on. At the general call, when we launch a call for project, poverty in Belgium, we have a selection of projects. We will bring them together in a kind of intervision where they can exchange, and then we will see, did we have a collective impact, and which is that? And then we have teams and sub-teams at the King Baudouin Foundation, and so we will also do an evaluation of the impact at the team level. And then at the King Baudouin Foundation level, but that's not an easy thing. That's a strategic plan, and that is a report that we have to give to our board.
Thank you very much. And I guess that it does inform King Baudouin's further strategy, future strategy, based on what you get on impact, right?
We are trying to use impact to create a virtuous circle, un cercle vertueux, like you say in French, indeed.
Okay, thank you very much. Guy?
Good morning, and thank you, Sotήρης, for having the opportunity to speak on this important topic, and thank you, Ludwig, for these very interesting remarks. First of all, before I go into the things that I had to say, I really agree, Ludwig, with what you said about philanthropy's role. I think that impact and impact measurement specifically is very much driven by philanthropy. It's very much a top-down process, and it's very much a part and influenced by financing models, and I will address that in a few minutes. And the thinking goes to why. I think that we first need to answer ourselves the question, why are we measuring? And I think that today's topic is towards a more impactful world, and I think that everybody in the social sector, I've been involved in the Israeli social sector for the past 20 years. Israel is considered to be one of the a very vibrant social sector. I think we are number 3rd in the world of numbers of NPOs per capita. And I think that everybody wants to make our life a better way, make our life better in some way. And I think the importance of impact measurement is not just saying that this is what we aim to achieve or believe that we are achieving, but actually know whether or not we are getting closer to it or not. And for me, I think the most important thing, even before the measurement, is having an impact mindset. So thinking about what we are doing, and I will give a specific example from a project to make it more tangible, but thinking about what we are doing through an impact lens. Because when you think about the spectrum of philanthropy and how social impact is being delivered, and I really agree with what you said in the beginning, that you go also in Israel 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when you go both to philanthropists and to NGOs, then they would say, this is what we are doing, and this is the impact we believe that we are achieving. So we are now conducting a project with Israel's largest university, the Hebrew University. It's a very well-known university, and they're doing scholarships. They give scholarships to underprivileged children, and basically what they want to do is to help poor people that don't have a chance to finance their degree, to get a degree in Israel's best university. So they have been doing this for the past 10 or 15 years, and basically what they have been saying up till now is we have given such and such money, so they measure their inputs, and we gave scholarships to 2,000 students, for example, so they measure their outputs, and we believe that this is making an impact. This is the way they have thought about their activities up till now. For the past 2 years, we have been making an impact measurement process for them to measure whether or not these scholarships have actually made a difference. So whether or not people who got the scholarship finished degrees in a higher statistic than the ones from the same profile who didn't get. And we see that in some faculties it works very good, and in other faculties it works less good. So now they really have a clear image of their outcomes, of what is the result of what they are doing. But they didn't stop in this place because they wanted to measure not only the outcomes, but they also wanted to measure the impact after 5 and 10 years of graduation, and also the economic impact of how much is it worth to the Israeli market, because people will now who were supposed to be in a poor life cycle are now in a better life cycle, so the country doesn't need to subsidize them, and they get higher salaries, so they pay higher taxes, and they contribute more to the GDP. And we can show that over a lifespan, this actual process has a positive impact of tens of millions of shekels to the Israeli economy. And I think that this is the mindset that many of the players in the Israeli social sector, both philanthropists and NGOs, have today. It's not the end of the road, but I think that it's the understanding that where we can measure, then we need to measure. And I think that the next step, and this is what Ludwig referred to, is about the impact the venture philanthropy and the impact investment is what we call outcome-based financing. So how do we finance social projects in a way that is both sustainable and impact-driven? And I think that the best example for this is the social impact bond, which we have about 7 of them in Israel, which and just to go back to the example of the university, so now the conversation that we are having with the university is let's do an income share agreement, kind of like a convertible loan to students, where if they succeed and they pass, they get the grade and they get a good salary, they will pay the loan back with a high rate. But if they don't succeed and they don't pass the university and it's not a successful project, they don't have to give back anything. So it's kind of a project which is between philanthropic and business-like project, but on the one hand, it's very sustainable because you just need philanthropy one time. You don't need philanthropy again and again and again over years. And second, it drives all of the system to be impact-driven. There is a clear KPI that all of the system is aligned to and working to achieve, and what it does, it helps all the system be very much impact-driven, and at the end, it also gets better results.
Thank you very much. A question on that. How was this process of conducting the impact assessment initiated? Was it from the government imposed? Did it came organically from the university?
Well, it's interesting that you ask, because basically, I mean, the university, all of the data that we analyze is data that the university has. And the university is a research center, so basically they can do the analysis themselves. And this goes to what I said as having an impact mindset. Basically, what they hired us to do is something that they could have done for themselves. And I think that the shift that this project has made in BTC is to say, okay, so now if we think of our project differently, then we can do the same kind of analysis on other projects that we have, even by ourselves, and we will be more impact-driven. So it wasn't commissioned by the government, but also to give another example of that, From the business world, we also conducted another project now for a business company, a CSR company, who has donated tens of millions of shekels to a very poor neighborhood in one of the cities in inner Israel. And after 7 years, they say, so what is our actual impact? So we did a very in-depth analysis of data from the Central Bureau of Statistics and interviews and questionnaires, a very in-depth research project commissioned to basically answer to them, is the neighborhood now better off after 7 years of philanthropy? But this, again, it wasn't issued by the government. It was issued by the philanthropic parties themselves. And I will talk to this at the second part of our panel, where is the role of government driving these kinds of processes.
This was actually my intention to create this bridge to the second main question, that is about what are the estimations for the future, how we can see in both practical as well as in policy level terms that we can further support this drive towards counting for the real reasons, for the actual reasons, for the philanthropic reasons, impact.
So just to pick up on the example, I want to talk about the role of government and the role of philanthropy. And I want to start with philanthropy first, because philanthropy usually comes first. And I think that the role of philanthropy in this is to take the chance, or to do the proof of concept that there are new ways of creating social change, which are both sustainable and impact-driven. And I think that this is the part of philanthropy, because government is much more hesitant, it's much more slower, but when it comes in, it comes in big. And I think that the government part of this is in two parts. First of all, when you talk about impact investing and whether or not it's done by philanthropists or by the business sector, you need an outcome payer at the end. Somebody who says, I understand that there are long-term outcomes that are meaningful to the society, whether it's locally or internationally, and I'm willing to pay if it succeeds. And if it doesn't succeed, I don't need to pay anything. But if it is a successful project, I'm willing to give back part of what I have earned. And this is a thing that only the government or public entities can do. This is the one part, I think, very important part of the government. And the another important part is scale. The government is the only one, at least in Israel, able to take one specific project and scaling it nationally, or even scaling it internationally. And I think that these are the two roles of government, and if philanthropy does its role as being the quicker one, and as Ludwig said, giving the money first and asking questions later, but asking the questions later and seeing whether or not it has achieved impact, and then telling the government, now you come and do your role in this, then we have a different way of thinking and mechanisms of how we achieve social impact.
Ludwig, if you'd like to intervene.
What's the future of impact? I would say, don't be afraid of measuring impact. Don't be afraid. Do it in collaboration with others. I don't believe anyone that will tell me that he or she or his organization will have the right way to measure impact, because this one person will be thrown out. You must, again, look with a lot of humility, but you must reflect. It's a progressive thinking, it's a collective thinking, and as I said at the beginning, in foundation sector, there are many collaborations to see how to measure the impact and how to impact, what's the contribution on that. Go to your beneficiaries, ask them. We are doing that every 3 years, King Baudouin Foundation. Every 3 years, we are going to the beneficiaries. Not because we want to hear how good we are, or to show how good we are to our board. Absolutely not. Because we have one thing that we want is that they don't please us. And it's not an easy thing, because if you receive 10,000, 20, 50, 100,000 from an organization, will you really be ready to criticize the organization? Because you will fear that maybe if you say unnice things, you will never have a fund again. And that's not true. But that's also true at our colleague levels. Our CEO launched 2 or 3 years ago, 4 years ago, the Best Failure Award. the Best Failure Award within the King Baudouin Foundation. So when he said that, all colleagues were saying, whoa, will I or will my team introduce something? I will be fired if I introduce something. And he insisted, and he said, no, every team has to give a best failure, and we will see. And so we also said, okay, this we tried and it didn't succeed. And the lessons learned from it is that when you do philanthropy, when you are testing innovative methodologies and so on, you may fail. And the one that did receive the Best Failure Award at King Baudouin Foundation was the only one that did not introduce anything, because he nearly was fired. I'm joking, but he or she nearly was fired because that was the one that didn't take any risk. So when you fail, you learn. So my message would be, choose your battles. Sotήρης, we are both in Transnational Giving Europe, a network that facilitates cross-border philanthropy. There, we are just to enable philanthropy. Donor-advised funds, we had a discussion yesterday. So there we are just to enable, to facilitate philanthropy. We don't need, we can have a reflection on the collective impact we have, but not on single donations. So choose your battles. Reflect before, sometimes it's very useful to reflect before, and then measure after. But the main thing is, when you reflect on impact, think on how it will boost philanthropy, because philanthropy is much needed, especially in those times.
Just to pick on that, I mean, I completely agree, Ludwig, and you say choose your battles, and you say don't fear and to expose yourself. And I also want to say, regarding choose your battles, don't argue too much about whose impact is this. Is it my impact? Is it your impact? Impact at the end is a collaborative level. And if we succeed, we have a complex answer to a complex situation. And I think that sometimes the reason, well, how will I know that this is really my contribution and not my partner's contribution? It really keeps us back from asking ourselves, did we make progress or didn't we make progress? And this is the most important question. So understand that you won't have a very specific in the end if you have a 20% contribution or a 40% contribution. But you will know that that there has been an impact. You will know that you had a meaningful part of it, even though if you won't know how much. And at the end, it's more about, and this goes to the why are we measuring? It's more about learning and improving than proving someone to anyone else.
Sotήρης, and exactly, Guy, what you say. We have the privilege, really the privilege, to work for the common good. So don't compete on impact. Exactly as you say, don't compete on who has the most impact. The important thing is that we are collaborating together to achieve more common good and more sustainable solutions for societal impact.
This actually reminds me something, you know, at HIGGS we get a lot of NGOs, non-profit organizations, civil social enterprises that they come, they say, I have this idea, I want to share it with somebody, but I'm afraid that he may implement it, the other guy, the other organization. And then we always say, okay, so what? The good thing will happen into the world. The one that you want to solve will be solved in a certain way. I want to touch upon a bit on the learning part, because I think at least in the Greek ecosystem, the idea of doing a social impact assessment, and HIGGS has done that for several CSR departments and nonprofits, is that they're afraid of what the outcome would be. You know, this either if we conduct a SROI, the €1, what it actually generates as value, but also in general whether they will have good numbers, because a lot of the times the discussion is on using the impact assessment, the results, for further fundraising or publicity and things like that. And I want to really stress the fact of the learning part, because usually what we try to tell everybody is that it doesn't really matter what your score will be today, but just conduct it 2 years later and see whether you have improved. And this would give you a learning path and something for you to hold on and to become even better. And by the way, Ludwig, what you said, it's very, very progressive for a charitable foundation to go back to their beneficiaries. And I can understand the problem there of them asking them to be really, really sincere so that you can have a good thing on impact. But I think, again, this goes back to when we check on what is the impact of charitable foundations to also check on how they support, in a way, they empower the organization of their funding, which is a dimension of impact that usually we don't see being accounted for. And it's an important dimension. We have a quick round of final remarks, so I don't know if you would like to add something more. Guy?
Yes, just one thing to comment on something that Ludwig used at the beginning, and he said, don't start measuring everything. And I completely agree. And I think that one thing we always have to keep in mind is what is the risk or danger in measuring too much. Because KPIs have power. There is a lot of political power behind that. And if we measure the wrong things, we can not only not do good, but we can also do harm. And I think that we always have to be, very critics of ourselves, and are we also measuring the right thing? And I think that always remember that when you talk about social impact, we are not here for the measurement. We are here for the impact. And the measurement is just a tool to help us understand whether or not we are getting closer to there or not.
Ludwig?
I will recall the title of the session, Towards a More Impactful World. So yes, it was a very important topic, and I'm sorry we couldn't disagree on the thing because again we are trying to do good. So when you try to do good, you should try to collaborate.
That's great, and I want to close the discussion, the panel, with what I see a very positive note. In general, I'm a very optimistic person, so sometimes somebody might disagree. But what we see is that even in the core of entrepreneurship, of investment, of profit, we see the world shifting a bit. We have B Corps, an interesting idea. We have social impact bonds, even if they're not very there to the moment. And potentially there is a need for support by governments. We have nonprofits that are thinking about it, and they're pushing actually, because one issue with impact is who actually pays the costs of that, because it could include significant costs or some costs. But they are pushing for their funders to actually include that. And of course, we have charitable foundations and the overall philanthropy, not the very traditional one, that it is just into the outputs and into the numbers, that I think that they're pushing towards that. And for that, I think that it's an interesting collaboration of the whole ecosystem towards trying to get a better understanding of what is created through all these different activities, funding, people working around the world, to make it a bit better than it was when they started. So thank you very much for the discussion, and thank you.